After a night with his mistress, wife handed divorce papers to millionaire husband at breakfast. A great chapter 6, and I promise you will enjoy this. Don't leave the story. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome to my second channel. Here the stories are shorter because so many of you asked for quick, heart-touching videos compared to my main channel. I truly need your love and support here too. Please subscribe and let's grow this family together because we are one big family forever. I try my best to satisfy you. Let's start with love. Some women are born knowing they will love deeply, and Evadne was one of them. At 32, she possessed the rare combination of fierce intellect and tender heart that had first captivated Millionaire during their university days. 8 years of marriage had only deepened their connection, weaving their lives together like golden threads in an intricate tapestry. Their home on Maple Street breathed with contentment, filled with the laughter of their 6-year-old daughter Iris and the comfortable rhythms of a couple who had chosen each other daily for nearly a decade. Millionaire, now 34, had built his architectural firm from nothing, his creative vision translating into soaring buildings that graced the city skyline. Each morning, Evadne would trace the lines of his face as he slept, marveling at how the boy she had fallen for had grown into this magnificent man. She knew every expression, every gesture, every dream that flickered behind his closed eyes. Their morning ritual was sacred choreography. While Millionaire prepared coffee in the kitchen, humming unconsciously as he measured grounds with the precision of an architect, Evadne would braid Iris's impossibly silky hair. Their daughter would sit cross-legged on the bathroom counter, chattering about her dreams from the night before with the articulate vocabulary that consistently amazed teachers and strangers alike. "Mama, I dreamed about numbers again," Iris announced one particular morning, her dark eyes sparkling with intelligence that seemed too vast for her small face. They were dancing in patterns, and I could see how they fit together like puzzle pieces that tell stories about how the universe works. Evadne smiled, securing the braid with a ribbon the color of autumn leaves. "Tell me about the patterns, sweetheart." "Well," Iris began, swinging her legs thoughtfully, "the numbers weren't just adding up like normal mathematics. They were creating geometric shapes that moved through space in ways that explained why flowers grow in spirals and why snowflakes have 6 sides, even though no two are exactly identical." From the kitchen, Millionaire called out, "Coffee's ready, my brilliant girls." His voice carried the warmth of a man who had found his place in the world. Evadne caught his eye as they entered the kitchen, and he pulled her close, kissing her temple with the reverence of morning prayer. These were the moments Evadne treasured most. The trinity of their family gathered around the small breakfast table, Iris explaining her latest theories about why cats always land on their feet or how rainbows hide behind clouds, while Millionaire listened with the same serious attention he gave his architectural blueprints. Their evenings were equally sacred. After Iris was tucked into bed with stories that grew more elaborate each night, Millionaire and Evadne would retreat to their kitchen. This was their sanctuary, where they cooked together in a dance perfected by years of practice. He would chop vegetables with architectural precision, while she stirred sauces with an artist's intuitive timing. Their conversations flowed like wine, discussions of Iris's remarkable mind, plans for weekend adventures, dreams of the house they would build someday on the coast. "She's going to change the world, you know," Millionaire said one evening, watching through the doorway as Iris arranged her toys in complex geometric patterns that seemed to follow mathematical principles she had intuited rather than learned. "I've never seen a child think the way she does." Evadne nodded, her heart swelling with protective love. "She gets it from both of us, your logical mind, my creative spirit. And something entirely her own," Millionaire added, spinning Evadne around between the stove and counter, making her laugh in the way that had first made him fall in love with her during their university study sessions. Their intimacy extended far beyond the physical. though their passion remained as intense as their early days. They would lie awake talking until the small hours, sharing fears and hopes with the vulnerability of souls who had found their perfect match. Evadne would trace the strong line of Maelric's jaw while he told her about his latest project, how he envisioned spaces that would inspire the people who moved through them. "I want to create buildings that hold love," he had whispered one night, his fingers tangled in her hair. "Spaces where families like ours can flourish and grow stronger with each passing season." Evadne believed him completely. She believed in his dreams, his integrity, his love for their family. When he worked late, she never questioned his explanations. When he traveled for projects, she supported him without hesitation. Her trust was absolute, crystalline in its purity, a gift she had given freely because she had never imagined it could be betrayed. Sunday mornings were their most treasured tradition. They would bring breakfast to bed, creating a nest of pillows and blankets where the three of them would burrow together like contented animals seeking warmth. Iris would read aloud from her favorite books, her voice clear and confident, occasionally stopping to explain complex concepts she had grasped with startling ease. "Daddy," Iris had said one particular Sunday, looking up from a book about astronomy, "if stars are so far away that their light takes enormous amounts of time to reach us, does that mean we're always seeing the past when we look at the night sky?" Maelric and Evadne exchanged glances of amazed pride. "That's exactly right, little genius," Maelric replied, pulling both his girls closer. "You understand something that takes most people years of education to grasp. So when I look at you and Mama," Iris continued with the relentless logic that consistently surprised them, "am I seeing who you were a tiny moment ago or who you are right now in this exact second?" "Right now," Evadne answered softly, though the question lingered in the air with philosophical weight that made her heart ache with tenderness. "Love happens in the present moment, sweetheart. It's the only thing that travels faster than light." These were the golden threads of their life, moments of connection so profound that Evadne felt certain they were building something eternal. Their love was not the desperate passion of youth, but the deep, abiding commitment of two people who had chosen to grow together rather than apart, strengthening their bond through shared challenges and mutual support. In the evenings after Iris was asleep, they would sit on their back porch, Evadne's head on Maelric's shoulder, planning their future with the confidence of people who believed in forever. They spoke of the house they would design together, combining his structural expertise with her aesthetic vision, the travels they would take as a family, the legacy they were building through their remarkable daughter. "I can't imagine loving anyone the way I love you," Maelric would whisper into her hair, and Evadne would close her eyes, letting the words settle into her bones like fundamental truth. Their physical intimacy was equally profound, not just desire but worship, each touch a prayer of gratitude for having found their person in a world of billions. They made love like devotees, with reverence and passion intertwined, creating a sacred space where only they existed, protected from the chaos of the outside world by the fortress of their mutual devotion. Evadne's trust was her strength and her gift to their marriage. She never checked his phone, never questioned his explanations, never doubted his word. This wasn't naivety, but deliberate choice. She had decided to love without reservation, to trust without condition, to believe in the man she had married with every fiber of her being. As she watched him sleep each night, she would marvel at their extraordinary fortune. Here was a man who cherished their daughter's brilliant mind, who supported her own creative dreams, who had built their life with the same careful attention he brought to his most important architectural projects. She was living the life she had dreamed of as a young woman, surrounded by love, creativity, and the endless possibilities that stretched before their family like an infinite horizon of shared tomorrows. The golden thread of their love seemed unbreakable, woven through with shared dreams, mutual respect, and the daily choice to cherish what they had built together through patience, compromise, and unwavering commitment to their family's happiness and success. Chapter 2. Cracks in Paradise. Even the strongest foundations can develop hairline fractures that remain invisible until the weight becomes too much to bear. The prestigious Meridian Commercial Complex project arrived in Millionaire's life like a comet, brilliant, transformative, and ultimately destructive. The client demanded innovation beyond anything he had previously created, a challenge that awakened an ambition in him that had been quietly sleeping beneath the comfortable routines of family life. Evadne supported his excitement completely, rearranging her own flourishing freelance design business to accommodate his increasingly demanding schedule. "This could change everything for us," Millionaire had said, his eyes bright with possibility as he spread the project blueprints across their dining table. Evadne studied the complex drawings, her trained eye appreciating the boldness of his vision and the technical challenges that would require months of intensive collaboration with specialists from multiple disciplines. "It's magnificent," she breathed, tracing the elegant lines with her finger. "You're going to create something extraordinary that will define the city's skyline for generations." What neither of them anticipated was how the project would consume him, requiring not just his professional skills, but his emotional energy in ways that left little room for anything else. The 18-hour days began gradually, then became the norm as construction deadlines loomed and client expectations intensified. Client meetings stretched into dinner hours, site visits demanded weekend attention, and the creative pressure transformed their once peaceful home into a staging area for architectural chaos. Evadne adapted with the grace that had always defined her approach to challenges. She took over the morning routine entirely, getting Iris ready for school while Millionaire left before dawn for the construction site. She cooked elaborate dinners that often grew cold while waiting for his return, never complaining when he arrived exhausted and distracted by problems that seemed to multiply faster than solutions could be implemented. Her own work began taking secondary importance as she prioritized keeping their family functioning smoothly. When the Williams & Associates firm offered her the lead designer position for their corporate rebranding campaign, a career-defining opportunity she had been pursuing for months, Evadne declined without hesitation, choosing family stability over personal advancement. The first lie was small, almost insignificant in its casual delivery. Millionaire claimed he needed to work late reviewing structural specifications when he actually joined his project team for drinks at the upscale hotel bar near the construction site. The rationalization came easily. He deserved to unwind after such intense days, and these informal gatherings helped build the team cohesion necessary for the project's unprecedented complexity and ambitious timeline. Leoriel commanded attention the moment she entered any room. At 29, the interior designer possessed a sophisticated beauty that was both approachable and intimidating, her mind moving with the same quick precision that had made her the youngest partner at her prestigious firm. Her ideas for the Meridian project challenged and inspired everyone on the team, bringing perspectives that elevated the entire creative process. During their first collaborative meeting, she questioned every assumption Millionaire had made about spatial flow and human interaction. Architecture isn't just about creating beautiful spaces, she argued, her green eyes intense with conviction that bordered on evangelical fervor. It's about understanding how people move through the world emotionally, not just physically. Every surface, every angle, every transition between spaces should tell a story about human experience. Her perspective shifted something fundamental in his approach to the project. Late-night work sessions became intellectual adventures, where they explored concepts of space and beauty with the passion of philosophers debating the meaning of existence itself. Maelric found himself energized by these conversations in ways he hadn't experienced since his university days, when every idea felt revolutionary and every design possibility seemed worth pursuing regardless of practical constraints. At home, the changes were subtle but noticeable to those who loved him most. Iris, with her unnaturally perceptive nature, was the first to recognize that something had shifted in her father's emotional landscape, though she lacked the vocabulary to articulate what her intuition detected. "Daddy seems tired," she announced during a family dinner, her fork poised halfway to her mouth, as she studied Maelric with the intensity of a scientist observing a specimen whose behavior had deviated from established patterns. "Not sleepy tired like when you work too much. Different tired, like when I'm thinking about something I can't figure out but know is important." Evadne and Maelric exchanged glances across the table, both recognizing the uncomfortable accuracy of their daughter's observation. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Evadne asked gently, though part of her dreaded the answer. Iris tilted her head, considering her words with the careful precision she brought to everything that mattered. "His face looks the same, but his eyes are looking at something we can't see. And he checks his phone more, even when no one is calling or sending messages that make the screen light up." The observation hung in the air with uncomfortable accuracy that made both adults shift nervously in their chairs. Maelric forced a laugh, ruffling Iris's hair with slightly too much enthusiasm. "You notice too much, little detective. I'm just focused on this big project that requires more attention than usual." But Iris's words echoed in Evadne's mind as she watched her husband more carefully in the following days. She noticed how he showered immediately upon coming home, how he had started wearing cologne again after years of forgetting such details, how his conversations about work had become simultaneously more animated and more guarded, as if he were editing his experiences before sharing them. The evening that changed everything began like countless others, with Evadne's hopeful attempt to recreate the intimacy that had been slowly disappearing from their marriage. She had prepared Maelric's favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, and opened a bottle of wine she had been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to arrive. "The project is incredible, Evadne," Maelric said, his enthusiasm genuine as he described the latest developments. "We're creating something that will transform how people experience commercial spaces. The interior design team has brought perspectives I never would have considered possible." "Tell me about them," Evadne encouraged, though something in his tone made her chest tighten with inexplicable unease that she couldn't rationally justify. "Leoriel has this amazing ability to understand the psychological impact of color and texture," Maelric continued, his voice taking on a quality Evadne had never heard before, not just professional admiration, but something warmer, more personal, tinged with the kind of respect typically reserved for profound intellectual equals. Evadne nodded, trying to ignore the way he said the woman's name with particular care, as if it were made of something precious that required gentle handling. She refilled his wineglass and asked about the technical challenges, the budget constraints, anything to steer the conversation back to familiar territory where she felt secure in her understanding. Later that evening, as they cleaned dishes together in their customary dance, Evadne noticed Maelric's phone buzzing repeatedly on the counter. Each notification made him glance over with an attentiveness that he no longer showed when she spoke about her own work or their daughter's achievements. When she playfully reached for the device to see what was so urgent, he moved it away with a casual gesture that felt anything but casual. "Just work updates," he explained, but his voice carried a tension that made Evadne's intuition sharpen like a blade sensing danger. That night, as Maelric slept beside her, Evadne lay awake studying the familiar contours of his face in the moonlight streaming through their bedroom windows. This was the man who had proposed to her in the college library, where they had spent countless hours studying together, who had cried when Iris was born, who still left little notes in her laptop bag when she traveled for design consultations. Yet something indefinable had shifted in the architecture of their relationship. The change was so subtle that she questioned her own perceptions, wondering if she was imagining shadows where none existed, or creating problems that had no basis in reality. Chapter 3. The Descent. There exists a moment in every betrayal when the betrayer recognizes the choice before them and willingly steps into darkness. The emotional affair began with innocent admiration for Leoriel's creative brilliance, but evolved into something far more dangerous as Maelric found himself anticipating their professional meetings with an intensity that had nothing to do with architectural innovation. Her apartment became a sanctuary where he could escape the mounting pressures of family responsibility and rediscover the ambitious young man he had been before mortgages and parent-teacher conferences had defined his priorities. Leoriel's living space reflected her sophisticated tastes: minimalist furniture that emphasized clean lines, abstract art that challenged conventional perspectives, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city's glittering skyline. The environment felt adult in ways that his own home, with its family photographs and children's toys scattered throughout every room, no longer did. Here, surrounded by wine glasses and architectural sketches, he could pretend he was still the passionate artist who had once believed he would conquer the world through pure creative force. "You're different from other married men I've worked with," Leoriel observed one evening as they reviewed fabric samples for the executive suites, her voice carrying a knowing quality that made his pulse quicken with dangerous anticipation. The observation felt like recognition of something he had been struggling to articulate about his own sense of diminished identity. "Different how?" he asked, though he suspected he knew the answer, and felt both thrilled and terrified to hear it spoken aloud. "You haven't given up on who you were before you became who you're supposed to be," she replied, her green eyes meeting his with unsettling directness that seemed to see past his careful facade of contentment. "Most men your age have surrendered to domesticity so completely that they've forgotten they once had dreams that belonged to them alone, separate from their obligations to other people." The words struck him like a physical blow because they articulated feelings he had been struggling to suppress for months. When had his dreams become secondary to mortgage payments and school registration deadlines? When had he stopped thinking of himself as an artist and begun seeing himself merely as a provider whose worth was measured by his ability to maintain suburban stability rather than create architectural beauty? "I love my family," he said, but the defensive quality in his voice betrayed the complexity of his emotions and his growing resentment of responsibilities that had once felt like privileges. "Of course you do," Leoriel agreed, moving closer under the pretense of examining the design layout spread between them on her coffee table. "But love doesn't require the complete erasure of self, does it? The greatest artists have always understood that passion feeds creativity rather than destroys it, and that authentic relationships thrive when both people remain fully themselves." Her fingers brushed his as she pointed to details in the architectural drawings, each contact sending electricity through his nervous system and awakening desires that had been dormant beneath layers of routine and responsibility. The professional boundary they had carefully maintained for months was dissolving with each shared glance, each moment of intellectual intimacy that felt more forbidden than any physical touch. At home, the contrast became increasingly stark and difficult to tolerate. Evadne's conversations centered on domestic concerns, Iris's school activities, household repairs, social obligations that felt suffocating rather than nurturing. Her questions about his work had become routine rather than genuinely curious, as if she had accepted that his professional life existed in a realm she could not fully access or understand. "How was your day?" she would ask each evening with the automatic warmth of a wife performing her expected role, and he would provide carefully edited summaries that omitted the hours spent in animated discussion with L'Oreal about art, philosophy, and the intersection of desire and creativity. Iris, however, remained impossible to deceive with her supernatural ability to detect inconsistencies that escaped adult notice. Her sharp mind processed information with the precision of a computer analyzing data for patterns that revealed deeper truths about human behavior. "Daddy," she said one afternoon as he prepared to leave for another evening work session, "your work clothes smell different when you come home than when you leave in the morning." The observation was delivered with the casual directness that made her such an unsettling child to adults who preferred children to remain oblivious to grown-up complexities. "Different how, sweetheart?" "Prettier," Iris replied, her head tilted in the characteristic gesture of someone processing information that didn't fit expected patterns. "Like flowers, but not the kind Mama grows in our garden. Fancy flowers that cost lots of money and come from stores rather than growing naturally in soil." Maelric's blood turned to ice water in his veins as he realized his 6-year-old daughter had identified L'Oreal's expensive perfume with terrifying accuracy. "Maybe it's from the construction site," he managed, hating himself for lying to this brilliant child who trusted him with the same complete faith her mother demonstrated daily. "Maybe," Iris agreed, but her tone suggested she found this explanation unconvincing and was filing the information away for future reference in the way that made her such an formidable observer of human nature. That evening's work session crossed every line they had carefully avoided during months of increasing emotional intimacy. The architectural plans became secondary to wine and conversation that grew increasingly personal as professional boundaries dissolved entirely under the pressure of mutual attraction and intellectual compatibility that felt more intoxicating than any physical desire. The betrayal was immediate and total, a violation of every sacred promise he had made to the woman who slept trustingly in their marriage bed. Chapter 4. The Night of Betrayal. Some nights change everything, marking the end of innocence with the terrible finality of choices that can never be undone. The evening began with Evadne's most tender attempt to reconnect with the husband she could feel slipping away despite her inability to understand why. She had spent the afternoon preparing an intimate dinner that recreated their first date, complete with the same wine they had shared while falling in love during their university days. Candles flickered throughout their dining room, casting warm shadows that transformed their familiar space into something romantic and sacred. "This is beautiful," Maelric said, as he discovered the scene she had created, his appreciation genuine despite the guilt that had become his constant companion over recent weeks. The effort she had made struck him with the weight of everything he was about to destroy through his selfish choices. "I wanted to remind us both of who we were before life became so complicated," Evadne replied, adjusting the placement of roses she had cut from their garden with the perfectionist attention that characterized everything she touched. "Sometimes we need to step back from our daily routines to remember what we're building together." She wore the emerald green silk dress that had always been his favorite, her dark hair arranged in the elegant upswept style that had taken his breath away on their wedding day. At 32, she possessed the refined beauty of a woman who had grown more graceful with each passing season, her confidence enhanced by 8 years of being deeply loved and cherished by someone she trusted completely. Iris had been invited to spend the night at her cousin's house, giving her parents the rare gift of an entire evening alone, together without the cheerful interruptions that usually punctuated their conversations. During dinner, Evadne spoke about her own work with passionate enthusiasm she usually reserved for discussing their daughter's achievements, sharing ideas for projects that had been developing in her mind while she supported his demanding career. "I never realized how much your thinking had evolved," Maelrick admitted, studying her face as she described her innovative approach to residential design that combined psychological principles with aesthetic beauty. "You're developing concepts that are incredibly sophisticated and original." "I've had time to refine my ideas while prioritizing your success," she replied without bitterness, though her words carried subtle weight that suggested sacrifices he had failed to fully appreciate. Sometimes, taking a supportive role allows you to see possibilities you missed when you were too focused on immediate achievement. Their conversation flowed with the intellectual ease of two people who had always been able to discuss anything, sharing thoughts and dreams with the comfort that came from years of mutual understanding. Yet Maelrick found himself distracted by mental comparisons between Evadne's grounded wisdom and Leorael's intoxicating philosophy of unlimited possibility that challenged every assumption about responsibility and commitment. After dinner, they moved to their living room, where Evadne curled against him on the leather sofa they had chosen together during their first apartment hunting expedition. The physical closeness felt both comforting and suffocating, her trusting warmth making his planned deception feel like a weight pressing against his chest with increasing intensity. "I've been thinking about our future," Evadne said softly, her fingers tracing familiar patterns on his chest with the intimate knowledge that came from 8 years of marriage. "About the house we want to build on the coast, the places we want to travel with Iris, the legacy we're creating together as a family." "Tell me," he encouraged, though part of his mind was already composing the text message to Leorael that would confirm his arrival at her apartment within the hour. "I want us to design something together," Evadne continued, her voice warm with dreams that felt both precious and impossible given what he was about to do. "A project that combines your architectural vision with my interior concepts, something that proves we're stronger as creative partners than we could ever be individually." The irony of her words cut through him like a blade heated in fire. Here was his wife offering exactly the kind of creative collaboration he claimed to crave, yet he had already chosen the hollow excitement of an affair over the substantial partnership she represented with such generous faith. "That sounds perfect," he said, meaning it completely, even as he knew he was about to destroy any possibility of such collaboration through his selfish pursuit of immediate gratification over lasting fulfillment. They made love that evening with a passion that felt both desperate and sacred, Evadne giving herself to him with the complete vulnerability that had always characterized their physical intimacy. Her trust remained absolute, even as his had been fractured beyond repair by months of emotional betrayal that was about to culminate in complete physical infidelity. "I love you more than I ever thought possible," she whispered against his skin as they lay entwined afterward, her voice carrying the fierce devotion that had sustained their marriage through every previous challenge. "I love you too," he replied, the words true even as his actions were about to make them meaningless. As Evadne slept trustingly in his arms, her breathing deep and peaceful, Maelrick stared at the ceiling and felt the full weight of what he was about to do pressing against his consciousness like a stone. In a few hours, he would leave their warm bed and go to another woman, carrying with him the scent and memory of his wife's devoted love, while betraying everything she represented. He could still choose differently. The path back to integrity remained open, requiring only the courage to honor his marriage vows over the intoxication of forbidden desire that promised everything while delivering only the destruction of what he already possessed. Instead, he carefully extracted himself from Evadne's sleeping embrace and dressed in the darkness with the stealth of a criminal stealing from his own life. Her wedding ring caught the moonlight as her hand reached unconsciously for his pillow, seeking the warmth of a husband who was already betraying everything sacred between them. The drive to Leorael's apartment felt like descending into hell by deliberate choice, each mile carrying him further from the man Evadne believed she had married. Yet the anticipation was intoxicating. The promise of passion without responsibility, desire without consequence, pleasure without the weight of 8 years of shared history and mutual obligation that had begun to feel like chains rather than bonds. Leoriel opened her door wearing silk that revealed more than it concealed, her smile carrying the triumph of a woman who had successfully lured a man away from his family through calculated seduction disguised as intellectual connection. "I wasn't sure you would come," she said, though her confidence suggested she had never doubted the outcome of months of careful manipulation. "Neither was I," Maelric admitted with brutal honesty. The betrayal was complete and deliberate, every kiss a theft from Evadne's trust, every touch a violation of sacred promises made before family and friends. Yet the passion felt real and urgent, alive with the electricity of transgression and the intoxication of choosing immediate desire over lasting commitment. Dawn approached with the inevitability of judgment, and Maelric prepared to return home carrying the weight of betrayal that would change everything. Chapter 5. The Serving. There are moments when dignity becomes the only armor left, and grace the only weapon worth wielding. The morning sun streamed through their kitchen windows with cruel optimism, illuminating the breakfast scene that would mark the end of their marriage forever. Evadne moved through her routine with the mechanical precision of someone who had spent sleepless hours preparing for this moment, every gesture carrying the weight of finality that Maelric's guilty conscience could not yet fully comprehend. She had discovered everything while he was betraying their marriage bed. His laptop, left carelessly open in his study, had revealed months of messages, hotel receipts, and intimate communications that painted a detailed portrait of systematic deception. The man who would soon return to their bed with another woman's perfume still clinging to his clothes had underestimated the intelligence of the wife whose trust he had been methodically destroying. The brown manila envelope sat beside his usual place setting like a coiled serpent, innocent in appearance, but containing the legal documentation that would reshape both their lives forever. Evadne had prepared his coffee with the same careful attention she had shown every morning for 8 years, though this final act of service carried ceremonial weight rather than wifely devotion. Maelric descended the stairs precisely when she expected, his hair still damp from the shower where he had tried to wash away the evidence of his nocturnal betrayal. He moved with the false confidence of someone who believed his deception remained undiscovered, already checking his phone for messages from Leoriel, while his wife orchestrated the destruction of everything he thought he still possessed. "Good morning," he said, kissing her cheek with the casual affection that had become performance rather than genuine emotion. His lips carried the metallic taste of guilt, though he remained oblivious to how thoroughly his careful facade had crumbled during his absence. "Good morning," Evadne replied, her voice carrying an undertone that should have warned him had he been paying attention to anything beyond his own selfish desires and the intoxication of forbidden passion that had consumed his moral compass. She placed his coffee before him with deliberate ceremony, the ritual now transformed into something approaching judicial proceeding. Steam rose from the dark liquid like incense in a chapel where innocence had come to be buried beneath the weight of choices that could never be undone. Maelric settled into his chair, already mentally planning his day around the afternoon meeting with Leoriel that had become the emotional center of his fractured existence. He scrolled through his phone while reaching for his coffee, the multitasking that had become his morning norm as his attention split between multiple realities that could never peacefully coexist. "What's this?" he asked absently. Noticing the envelope without initially processing its significance, or the way Evadne watched his face with the intensity of someone witnessing a transformation she had orchestrated with mathematical precision. "Divorce papers," Evadne replied, with the calm directness that had always characterized her approach to difficult conversations, her voice steady as bedrock despite the hurricane of emotions she had been weathering in private. The words hit him like a physical blow, causing his coffee cup to clatter against the saucer as his hand began trembling uncontrollably. "What did you say?" "Divorce papers," she repeated, settling into the chair across from him with the composed grace of someone who had spent sleepless nights preparing for this moment of reckoning. "Fully executed, legally binding, and filed with the court yesterday afternoon while you were destroying what remained of our marriage." Maelrick's face drained of color as he opened the envelope with fingers that shook so violently he could barely manipulate the legal documents. The papers were thorough and professionally prepared, detailing asset division, custody arrangements, and financial obligations with the precision of someone who had anticipated every possible complication and planned accordingly. "Evadne, I can explain," he began desperately, but she raised her hand with quiet authority that silenced him immediately, her gesture carrying more power than any raised voice could have achieved. "I know about Leoriel," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute knowledge gained through careful investigation. "I know about the apartment where you spent last night while I lay awake reading every message you thought you had hidden, every receipt that documented your systematic betrayal of our marriage vows." "How long have you known?" he whispered, his world dissolving around him like sugar in rain as the full scope of his exposure became clear. "Long enough to protect myself and Iris from the consequences of your choices," she replied with devastating calmness. "Long enough to understand that the man I married would never have been capable of such sustained deception and cruelty disguised as love." The breakfast table where they had shared countless meals as a family had become a courtroom where justice was being administered with surgical precision. Maelrick stared at the papers that documented the legal dissolution of everything he had once held sacred, seeing his life reduced to financial calculations and custody schedules that would govern their future interactions. "This doesn't have to end our marriage," he pleaded, though even as he spoke he recognized the futility of his words given the thoroughness of her preparation. "People work through these things. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you." "You love me?" Evadne's voice carried a quality of steel wrapped in silk that was more devastating than any screaming rage could have been. "You held me in your arms after being with her. You made love to me with hands that had touched another woman hours before. You looked into our daughter's eyes while planning your next betrayal. That isn't love, Maelrick. That's cruelty disguised as affection." The truth of her words hit him like physical blows, each accusation landing with devastating accuracy because they were based on actions he could not deny, minimize, or rationalize away, no matter how desperately he searched for explanations that might preserve some shred of his former identity. "I never meant for this to happen," he said desperately, though the excuse sounded hollow even to his own ears, as it echoed in their kitchen where he had shared so many moments of genuine happiness. "But it did happen," Evadne replied, with the kind of calmness that comes only after complete emotional devastation has been processed privately, repeatedly, deliberately, with full knowledge of what you were risking and what you were destroying through your selfish pursuit of immediate gratification. She rose from the table with fluid grace, but now her elegance carried power rather than mere beauty, the transformation evident in her posture and the way she commanded space. The morning light caught the gold of her wedding ring as she removed it with ceremonial precision, placing it on the table beside the signed divorce papers, like an offering on an altar where their marriage had come to die. "You had a woman who would have died for you, Maelrick," she continued, her voice never rising above conversational level despite the magnitude of destruction she was documenting. "A daughter who thought you hung the stars in the sky, a life that most people spend their entire existence trying to create and never achieve." "I still want that life," he whispered, though his words carried no conviction after what he had chosen the previous night. "With whom?" she asked, her eyebrow raising with the faintest suggestion of dark humor. "Because the woman who trusted you completely died last night when you chose temporary pleasure over permanent love." Evadne moved toward the kitchen doorway with the dignity of someone who had been broken but refused to remain shattered, then paused to deliver words that would echo in his memory long after their legal proceedings concluded. "You will learn what you lost, Maelric, and our daughter will learn that a woman's worth is never determined by a man's ability to recognize it." The house fell silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock, counting seconds toward a future that looked nothing like what they had planned together. Chapter 6. The Phoenix Rises. Revenge, when executed with precision and patience, becomes indistinguishable from justice. Evadne commanded attention the moment she entered any room, her presence radiating the magnetic confidence of someone who had transformed devastating betrayal into unshakable power. At 32, she possessed the refined beauty of a woman who had learned to value herself with the same devotion she had once reserved for an unworthy husband. Her success was not accidental, but architected with the same careful attention to detail that had once made her the perfect complement to dreams that belonged to someone else. The offices of Caldris Design occupied the prestigious top floor of the financial district's newest tower, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of a city where her name had become synonymous with innovative excellence. Her company had grown from desperate necessity into an empire that commanded respect from clients who competed for her attention with the desperation of supplicants seeking favor from a queen who granted audiences only to those worthy of her time. The Henderson Group is requesting an exclusive consultation for their international expansion, her assistant announced during their morning briefing, handing Evadne a file thick with proposals that represented more revenue than Maelric's struggling firm had generated in its most successful period. "They want to discuss the European markets project solely with you, refusing to work with any other designer." Evadne accepted the file with the practiced grace of someone who had earned her position through brilliance rather than circumstance or connection. The woman who had once declined career opportunities to support her husband's ambitions now commanded fees that exceeded his annual income, and corporations across 3 continents sought her expertise with the reverence typically reserved for artists and visionaries. Iris flourished in their new life with the adaptability of a child raised by a mother who refused to model victimhood or bitterness. At 6 years old, she moved through the world with the confident curiosity of someone who expected excellence because she had never been taught to settle for mediocrity. Her intellectual gifts had been nurtured by exposure to international art galleries, business conferences, and conversations with successful women who treated her insights with the respect typically accorded to adult scholars. "Mama, why do people always ask if you're available instead of assuming you are?" Iris asked during breakfast in their elegant penthouse, her school uniform perfectly pressed because she had learned to take pride in presentation as an extension of self-respect and personal standards. "Because truly valuable people are selective about how they invest their time and energy," Evadne replied, spreading organic honey on artisanal toast with the same careful attention she brought to million-dollar design proposals. "When you know your worth, others learn to approach you with appropriate respect." "Is that why Daddy always looks uncomfortable when he brings me here for visits?" Iris asked with her devastating directness, her dark eyes studying her mother's face for information that adults often tried to hide from children they underestimated. The truth was that Maelric's life had unraveled with the systematic thoroughness that characterized everything Evadne touched when she applied her considerable intelligence to achieving specific outcomes. At 34, his architectural firm struggled to secure the prestigious projects that had once defined his professional identity, his creative vision dimmed by the emotional devastation of losing everything that had provided meaning and purpose to his existence. The man who had once dreamed of buildings that could hold love now designed functional structures devoid of the passion that had once set his work apart from his competitors. His reputation had been quietly but effectively damaged by word-of-mouth accounts of his personal failures, as successful people tended to avoid association with those who had proven themselves capable of betraying the trust of people who loved them completely. L'Oreal had vanished from his life with the casual cruelty of someone who had never intended their relationship to survive difficult circumstances or provide anything beyond temporary excitement. When his professional prospects dimmed and his personal scandal became public knowledge among their professional circle, she simply stopped returning his calls, leaving him to confront the magnitude of his losses in complete isolation. The custody exchanges occurred at the marble lobby of Evadne's luxury building, neutral territory that emphasized how thoroughly their relationship had been redefined by legal boundaries rather than emotional connection. Melrick would arrive precisely on time, his once confident posture now carrying the weight of a man who understood too late what he had destroyed through his selfish choices. "Hello, Evadne," he would say during these encounters, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who no longer possessed the right to familiarity or warmth from someone he had betrayed so completely. "Melrick," she would reply with perfect courtesy, her success evident in everything from her designer clothing to the ease with which she commanded respect from everyone in their vicinity, including the building staff who treated her with the deference typically accorded to people of genuine importance. The conversation that would define their permanent relationship occurred during the prestigious City Planning Awards ceremony, where Evadne received recognition for innovative commercial design that had transformed 3 downtown blocks into spaces that enhanced both economic vitality and community connection. She accepted the crystal trophy with gracious confidence, her acceptance speech focusing on the importance of creating environments that honored human dignity and possibility. Melrick attended because Iris had specifically requested both parents witness her mother's achievement. He sat in the auditorium's back section, watching Evadne move through the reception with magnetic presence that drew admiration from corporate executives, city council members, and international design consultants who competed for her attention. "She's extraordinary," one of the award committee members commented, nodding toward Evadne as she discussed urban development philosophy with the mayor. "Such brilliant innovation combined with remarkable business acumen. The city is fortunate to have attracted someone of her caliber." Their final meaningful conversation occurred in the parking garage afterward, where they stood beside their respective vehicles while Iris gathered art supplies from Evadne's luxury sedan. The car was new, purchased with earnings from contracts that materialized after her reputation for excellence spread throughout the professional community. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished," Melrick said quietly, his words carrying genuine admiration mixed with profound regret for the role he had played in forcing her transformation. "Thank you," Evadne replied, accepting his acknowledgement with the same gracious neutrality she might show a business acquaintance whose opinion held minimal significance. "Do you think you could ever forgive me?" he asked with the desperation of someone who had lost everything worth having. Evadne considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I'm not angry anymore, Melrick. Anger requires emotional investment, and I've learned to reserve mine for people and projects worthy of such energy." Her words carried more devastation than any expression of rage could have achieved. She had moved beyond hatred into something far more complete. Absolute indifference to his suffering, total disconnection from his emotional reality. As he drove away in his aging sedan, Evadne stood holding Iris's hand, watching city lights illuminate buildings where her achievements now influenced urban development policy. The woman who had once measured her worth by her husband's success now shaped international design trends. "Mama," Iris said, "you look like a queen." "How does a queen stand?" Evadne asked. Like she knows exactly who she is and isn't afraid of anyone discovering the truth, Iris replied. The revenge was complete. She had become too magnificent for him to approach. His betrayal had freed her to discover her extraordinary capabilities, and justice had been served with elegant precision.